indigenous filmmakers.
Yeah. It's really fucking okay, so representation, I feel like representation is important. Not to the detriment of creativity. I'm not for like forced diversity or anything, but it's always nice to see uh, somebody who looks like you on screen. You know what I'm saying? It's always nice to see people who are from your culture who are either behind the camera or in front of the camera or who are given a positive light to things. And there's a lot of uh, like Indian exploitation in horror from like Old Chief Woodenhead from the Creep Show. I think it's Creep Show 2.
Yeah.
You know, with the fucking which I mean I liked that. I dug the fuck out of it. And then, you know, like Poltergeist is the Indian burial ground, as if this entire fucking country is not an Indian burial ground. And even in like Pet Cemetery, it's kind of alluded to with the Micmac tribe and the Wendigo and all that good shit. Which the movie of the week, the director is actually Micmac, so that kind of lines up a little bit. But it's so rare to see positive representation of Native Americans.
Well, I don't even think it's so much positive. It's like you were saying,
accurate.
It's stereotypes from white people, you know.
Yeah.
As far as, oh well, he's one with the land and he must have wisdom. I think
that old noble savage trope, you know.
Yeah, and I think what is so great about actually hearing from a native, you know, an indigenous director from the same tribe, actually, you know, is the honesty that you get, or his version of the honesty. Because one thing that I think that this is one segment of the population who is very strongly not thought of in general at all. I mean, to me, this is probably one culture that has truly been ransacked. I mean, and just devastated. And what's left is a lot of anger, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of substance issues, just a lot. I mean, could you have your culture ripped away from you and your language and who you are? So there's a lack of identity or not fitting in with your culture versus the current culture, or how do you assimilate? And, you know, it's,
yeah, and up until like pretty recently, actually, like trying to keep that culture alive, even on a day-to-day basis, not even in a public eye kind of thing, but on a day-to-day basis in your home. I mean, that was fucking hard. Up until, you know, really fucking recently, like in the past, you know, few decades, they had residential schools where they would take Indian kids, and the whole plan was to kill the Indian and save the child. So they would beat them, they'd cut their hair, and they'd beat them when they spoke their language, and they'd beat them when they prayed, and anything that didn't fall in line with this colonialist fucking goddamn filthy Jewish desert wizard, they'd fucking beat them, and they'd beat them to death, and there wasn't anything anybody could do about it because that was just the law. And I mean, even
there was
now,
a lot of rape and
sexual
abuse, and
even now, like especially it happens a lot up north, like in Canada, in the northern U.S., like Indigenous women are murdered and raped at an astronomical rate, and it's never, like almost never investigated. There's Standing Rock Reservation made news a couple years back with the DAPL pipeline and shit. But like in that reservation, I remember when I was in college, one of our assignments was to do flyers to help with the fundraiser for them, because like on that reservation, people were freezing to death in their homes. because like up there it's so cold and they didn't have heat. You don't have blankets. You don't have fucking heaters. I mean, it's so polar, and and there's like systems in place to keep that shit going. But that I'm getting way off. I'm sorry. But it does lead to stuff like Blood Quantum. It's not a super sunshiny image of an indigenous community. It's a real image. That's like one of my favorite movies of all time is called Smoke Signals. It's not a horror movie, but it's almost like a coming of age story about a couple of Indian kids, and one's father dies, and he has to come to terms with that and stuff. And it's not a rosy picture, but it's a really real picture. It's based on the book The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven by Sherman Alexie, who's a brilliant indigenous author and like commentator, or not like a commentator, but I mean, all of his stuff is commentaries on indigenous life and culture in the current, and you don't see a lot of honesty, and you don't see a lot of positivity.
Well, I don't think, I think they're dealing with a lot, and I think until that gets addressed, and I'm sure it's a real slap in the face too, to always think, and no offense to Canadians, but it's always, oh, Canadians are such good, kind people, blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, bullshit. I have another side of the story.
Yeah, unless
Again,
you're First
I'm
Nations.
overgeneralizing, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's even when you listen to the movie, or even the documentary that was done, that he credited to being a huge influence, the director. I don't have it right in front of me. I just forgot it.
The incident at Restigouche?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, when the prime minister was like, well, we gave you this land, and she's like, no, this is our land, and you're giving us a piece of it, It's like the audacity, even just sitting there watching it, or and telling them that they're not allowed to fish, and that's.
Could you imagine a reporter standing up to a public figure like that now? You know what I'm saying? Like, talking like the way and being allowed to talk that way to them.
Well, that was the director.
Shut down. Was that the director, the woman?
Wasn't that the director, or was that
I think so. Yeah.
I watched it, but I didn't know who she was. You know what I'm saying? Because
she was
the way that it was cut and edited. But she was just like, you said that our can't have a culture, without a language or something. It's just like, dude.
Yeah, and it was like,
wow.
It was like, because a lot of treaties are based on these being sovereign nations. So they started talking about their sovereignty, and he was like, well, yeah, you can be sovereign, and up to a point. You have to really look at the definition of sovereignty that's being used. So, I mean, ever since you people came to this country, but no, I mean, it's been fucking 400 something years of oppression. You know what I'm saying? It's still going on. So it comes out in the art. It comes out honestly in the art, and you don't see.
I don't know anything about the Canadian side of it, because I don't like the stuff that I've watched on YouTube and the clips and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's here on reservations here in America, and they're poor.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so.
Like,
on purpose.
Very bad. Yeah, and they make it to where they don't have anything. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no jobs. You can't. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's why alcohol and everything is so rampant.
And
it's like there's no hope, and there's so much abuse, physical abuse.
I watched one where they were doing metal music, and they had built the stage, and they would have a group of them would get out there and just play some like just really heavy ass metal music, and throw a little party together, and just it's really interesting to see that how they get along, and and it makes sense, like for directors and people that want to do film that are native. It's just like, well, where are you going to get it? You know what I'm saying? If you live on the reservation, how are you going to, you got to move away to get the funding and to get the contacts, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a shame, and nothing's changing though. Nothing's changing for them. It's not getting better.
No, it's definitely not getting any better. I have seen though, it's like this. There's currently, like over the past few years, there's this movement of people like my age and younger who are digging back into their heritage and trying to bring the culture back. Like there's a prophecy about after the seventh generation, the people of the land coming back and stuff. It was like a Sitting Bull's prophecy or whatever. I'm not super sure right now, but I mean, you see a lot of it, and it's because of that being tamped down for so long, that it's almost a way of a rebellion, and it's also like a betterment of self, and a really trying to find your identity,
To me, that way of life, though, to live with the earth and to not abuse it is way fucking better than what's going on now.
Yeah.
That way would have worked out a hell of a lot better than, capitalism gives you money, you know what I'm saying? But you're sucking the earth dry.
And it's not even just, living with the earth, it's living as a community.
Yeah, taking care of each other, doing what you got to do.
Well, like even the director even says that he views the earth as a life force.
Yeah.
Well, and we're taking everything out of the middle of it. You're mining the hell out of it. You're pulling stuff out, and you're putting it on top. What used to be inside the earth is on top of it. How long do you think this shit's going to last? Like it's going to have a negative impact in a way. You know what I'm saying? You can't continue to just take the stuff out of the earth and put it on top of it and be like, oh yeah, it's not going to get warmer.
Yeah, it's fine. Totally fine.
You got all this steel and rock out here now that used to be inside, now it's on top. So yeah, it's going to suck in the heat. That's just part of it, But I don't know.
But as far as like even just what kind of is messed up to me a little bit, hopefully I'm not talking out of sorts, but even the concept of that literal concept of blood quantum,
it's a very white concept.
It's a very white concept that was enforced by the whites, that, your blood, a fraction of your blood determines if you are qualified as, to be part of this tribe. However, each tribe determines how much of a percentage, what fraction you are. So I almost find it could you imagine one have to carry a card to determine if you fit in or not? And then, where like you have the black population, what do they say, that a drop of blood and you can call yourself black? The old adage for that. So with this, it's the tribe determines it, but I almost feel like that's also a way of it's a way of shutting out your members. So that's kind of a confusing thing for me to fully understand.
Well, when it started, it was all about the roles. The Dawes roll is what it's called. And you would come in and everybody would come in and register, which is caused a problem with like blood quantum now, because there were a lot of people who didn't go register. Because even though they might have been half, they might have been 3/4, they might have been full bloods, they didn't want to be on that roll. They didn't want to be under the eye of the BIA. They didn't want to be under the eye of the government,
Or they weren't even labeled correctly.
Yeah. So you got, so that's kind of dicked everybody, down, as you go. And I know I'm Western Band Cherokee, and not too long ago they dropped blood quantum. because because of the freemen. Because we would have it was kind of controversial, but they kicked the freemen out of the tribes because you had blood members of the tribe who were becoming too diluted to receive benefits, to housing, to mods, like, and in certain places like per cap checks and shit, and then you had these descendants of freemen, our slaves, who were still getting the same benefits as full bloods, for forever. So they kicked them out of the tribe because if they were going to have to turn away members of the actual members of the people, they were gonna turn them away too, because there's no way to prove their actual blood quantum. So
that's right. I remember now it being about financial.
And then the Supreme Court stepped in and said you couldn't do that. So then the chief came out and said, well, if we got to keep them in, everybody's in. If you've got ties to the tribe, then you're in. One drop of blood is enough to be in the tribe. That's I can't speak for other tribes, but that's kind of the politic breakdown on mine, or one of mine. But it's a very white concept that has been kind of adopted.
Yeah. And I can see why it's been adopted, but it's sad that it had to be adopted by the tribes.
Yeah. It is. I can see it both ways, kind of.
Yeah.
But it's to me personally, and I'm not like on a board or anything, but I think it's more about to me, it's more about the actual acceptance of your culture and your roots than it is what's in your fucking veins.
Oh yeah.
Because you can be you can be 3/4 of the way there, like 3/4 blood, and be a fucking apple and not know shit about your history. So I mean, some kid who's 1/64th is about that life. Is about the ceremonies and shit. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But should we start talking about the movie now, or did you have more you wanted to add?
No, I don't want to get too political. Let's go on with the movie.
All right, yeah. Let's move on